Tenshinhan is a character who gets overlooked amongst Dragon Ball's main cast, either for people seeing his arc as a Piccolo prototype, or being disappointed at how he was treated in later material. While there's some truths to both, I'll be going over why his character arc deserves more praise than it gets. Some information I have covered in the past, but this will act as a more updated, comprehensive version. Before going over his introduction, it's worth covering what limited information and implications we are given on his early life. The most notable would be Toriyama confirming those with the third eye have godlike powers, and Tenshinhan being raised by Surusenin caused him to lose the ability to use these powers for good purposes, including things such as true seeing, which in the Buddha and Taoist cultivation narrative of the series would essentially equate to key sensing in a league of its own. This makes it apparent Tenshinhan unlocked his third eye and was raised by Surusenin from an early age. His bond with Chaozu also provides us further clues towards their history. One of the main inspirations behind Chaozu's character design and mannerisms is the Jianxia, an undead being within Chinese folklore, brought to life through what's called their inferior consciousness, not wishing to leave the body, and a Taoist master reanimating them. Though Surusenin would seem to be the one responsible under this assumption, Tenshinhan may have played a part, as their friendship is one in which Chaozu is entirely dependent on Tenshinhan for a purpose in life. If so, this may have been as early as when Tenshinhan was 5, if taking Chaozu's birth date in the Super Exciting Guide as his rebirth. Tenshinhan's redemption arc at the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai is one in which the thematic ideas of dark and light are woven into his character in both a very Buddhist and Taoist manner. His fight with Yamcha presents the first hint at there being more to his arrogant persona, with him bothering to praise Yamcha, and becomes aware of the rival Kame-sen-ryu being a more impressive school than he believed. It's when he faces Jackie Chun that we truly see more than his surface level desire to be an assassin like Tao Pai Pai, that's best displayed through the Taiyoken. The word for sun in Japanese, Taiyo, and its Chinese equivalent, Taiyang, can also be alternatively viewed as supreme Yang, as the sun is considered the most pure representation of Yang energy. Also take into account that this technique is of Tenshinhan's own creation, with him referring to it as Shin Surusen-ryu, or New Crane Hermit School, and combined with Muten Roshi's talk of walking into the path of light, presents Tenshinhan as having a positive Yan nature that's covered by the shadow Surusenin's nurture has placed on him. On the subject of Roshi compelling him to walk into the light through the path of righteousness and away from the path of evil, the wording in the original text provides nuances lost in translation. The use of the kanji aku for evil here is one created by combining the kanji of sugu, weak, and heart, kokoro, that equates evil with a weak heart or mindset. By comparison, tada, or righteousness, consists of tome, foot, below ichi, heaven, or to stand upright under heaven. Some may be confused, as the ichi kanji also means one, but it also means heaven in this context, due to the Taoist belief of the universe being a single entity until the divide into yin and yang. This ultimately makes Roshi's plea one for Tenshinhan to overcome the emotional weakness of Surusenin's indoctrination, hiding his true nature to stand upright upon an unbending path in line with heaven's will. This also adds to Tenshinhan's unbending adherence to Buddha after his battle with Goku, that we'll soon get into. Goku vs Tenshinhan is where many parallels come into play, some evident at the time, and even more from a wider perspective of the franchise's history. The conflict's obvious inspiration is that of Sun Wukong versus Erlan Shen, but Tenshinhan is very much the reverse of his cultural inspiration. Whereas Erlan Shen's Shioji incarnation was a demigod seen as worthy to be amongst the heavens with humility, Tenshinhan is one born with godly potential who has fallen to earth and been tainted by arrogance. This also makes the Daizenshu's decision to classify classify him as a descendant of the Three-Eyed People, and his Seiyu, Suzuoki-san, having been on board with this meaning he's of alien ancestry, deserves more than the knee-jerk reaction some have to this retcon. Many of the characters, with either divine cultural origins or roles at this point of the story, would soon be revealed to have celestial origins in the less theistic sense of alien species, which creates a new tie between Goku and Tenshinhan, both celestial beings in a sense, that were brought down to Earth. But whereas one would be able to gain the mindset to eventually rise above his nature, the other's nurture removed him from his godly gifts. Whereas Lan Shen captures the arrogant Sun Wukong, Tenshinhan's last wall of arrogance is broken down by finding someone who can bring out his true desire for Buddha, and his victory is one he can't really count. Before that victory, there is the Kikoho, where its preparation is a visual display of Tenshinhan's character growth. The mudra to concentrate his ki is the Uttara Bodhi mudra, or hand sign of supreme enlightenment, obviously symbolizing both perfect unity of the body and the embodiment of light and emptiness that is Vairocana Buddha. The mudra in preparation for firing it resembles both the Yoni mudra that symbolizes empty space like a womb, or In to balance the Yan of the Praya mudra, as well as the Zaikuji In within Japanese Buddhism specifically, that represents the third eye and sky. In other words, Tenshinhan's enlightenment after rejecting Surusenen's ideology has him find the perfect balance of Yin and Yang, as his internal light brings forth external emptiness. It's after the Tenkaichi Budokai that Tenshinhan suffers helplessness against Piccolo Daimao, his newfound steps into the light still not being a match for this great darkness. In one part, this is from Surusenen's very limited scope for his students' talent, of merely being superior to another school. Another part, Tenshinhan's own inexperience, in coming unprepared, shown his path straying from the arrogant Suru gave him, isn't one that can disappear all at once. And the third part, still being trapped by the past ideology of sealing Piccolo Daimao away, rather than surpassing the ideas of his mentors, and bettering himself to overcome the Daimao, as Goku would. It's through this that actions have to speak louder than words, and the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai provided that in Tenshinhan having to face the man he once idolized. It's here that Tenshinhan dedicating himself to a spiritual path of Buddha overcomes Tao Pai Pai's use of technology to enhance him, as well as shows his moral superiority in attempting to de-escalate the conflict with words and beseech Surusenin not to continue the cycle, rather than purely using brute force to convey his ideology as in the past, having fully walked into the light through his actions. It's not as though all shadows are gone now, as the scar Tao Pai Pai inflicts on him stays with Tenshinhan, despite being nowhere near as severe as those Goku and others would recover from, an emotional reminder of where he came from. Despite that, and shown an incredible technique thanks to his third eye, Tenshinhan is still too shrouded by the past to make full use of it, as Goku's mind's eye surpasses Tenshinhan's 3 or even 12, that purely focus on the macroscopic and are unable to see the microscopic subtleties of ki, with him being brought to the wayside through one he could fight on par with once, having taken steps Tenshinhan had yet to catch up to. It's through this reminder of the past and inability to forget it that we see why Tenshinhan's relevance to the plot goes downhill from here. When he uses the Kikoho against Nappa, it's no longer as a symbol of newfound balance, but purely through Surusenen's ideals of overwhelming strength to subjugate someone, and proves equally as ineffective as his former master's ideology. Like other attempts in the series to sacrifice oneself to stop an opponent, in the story revolving around the Taoist concept of cultivating one's ki and bettering one's life because of it, this method proves futile compared to putting one's life on the line to overcome their current limits. We see this ideological flaw continue in Tenshinhan realizing he can't catch up to Goku if copying the same regimen he's moved beyond, but it comes to the wrong conclusion, in his answer to taking a new spin on the Kaioken being a Shin Kikoho that actively sacrifices sacrifices his life for raw power. Though the force of this spiritual technique surpasses that of even greater mechanical fighters than Pai Pai, it's still one rooted in Surusenen's flawed mindset he can't scrub from his subconscious. At the same time though, this Shin Kikoho proves effective with the girl being different from the Kikoho against Nappa, and represents the different mindset Tenshinhan has, both from back then and his master. Rather than attack Cell through a desperate attempt to defeat them through it, his goal from the start is merely to halt his search for perfection, in acknowledgement of his own inability to keep up, but not desiring to simply watch stronger fighters take the spotlight, as he has for most of this fight against Gero's creations. With this mindset of doing the best he can, Tenshinhan's mindset after the Cell game is very similar to Goku, without the latter to act as a goal. Tenshinhan gains for a humility as a martial artist, with his only goal being to continue his Shugyo in a peaceful environment. Despite his otherworldly origins though, he still doesn't end up competing with the Saiyans, Piccolo, or even aiming to usurp Kuririn holding the title of strongest Earthling, through him not pushing himself to the extent Goku does, and it seemingly being maintenance rather than progression in having accepted his limits. Despite his diminished role being disappointing, it does make sense he wouldn't make greater use of his third eye's potential, with the wounds of the past not healing entirely being the realistic take of trauma and traits during one's formative years. Although seeing a character overcome these can be inspiring payoffs, it's more often the case the past trauma is something one finds ways to live with rather than moving on from, and Tenshinhan's own approach to doing so is quite the healthy decision. He instead devotes himself to living a humble life as a farmer, teaching those that aren't shackled by Surusenin, and, in Dragon Ball Online, finding a balance of his experiences and new enlightenment through the Shin Surusen Ryu, wherein normally fatal techniques instead allow those following his ideology to risk death, but survive to become stronger, and perhaps succeed in keeping up with alien allies where he failed. It is also worth noting the similarities in arc, personality, and mannerisms between he and Piccolo, which shows the contrast of where both end up. Whereas Piccolo rose far above what could be expected of his origins in power and fulfillment, Tenshinhan never rose to his own full potential, through his upbringing holding him back, as a tragic sacrifice to the plot. With that said, Tenshinhan's arc is one of a man raised in darkness entering into the light, but unable to fully remove that shadow. Not quite a wasted character, and more cautionary tale in the darker side of one's birth not determining their destiny, his inability to fully move on, making him one of the series' most human characters, something that can also be said of the other two of what can be called the main Earthling trio. Thank you for having watched through this analysis. Feel free to request others in the comments, subscribe to not miss them, and check out these older ones. With the central point of this video, it does make one wonder what if Tenshinhan was given a more favourable upbringing, to which you may see such a scenario here soon enough.